Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike. Apostasy, Chapter 9. Learn what you need to learn. Seeing that doesn't bother you anymore, Draco asked when he caught up to her. Hermione scoffed. Why would it? It was the first time you killed someone. Does the first person you killed still haunt you? Hermione retorted. I have never claimed to be a good person, Draco mumbled. Hermione hummed, which is what I'm claiming to no longer be, and yet you're struggling with that notion. Her eyes roamed over the spirits around her. You don't just wake up one day and flip allegiances, Granger. That's not how that works. Who said that's what happened? Wasn't it? She could feel his eyes on her, but she wouldn't look at him. No, it was more gradual than that. It was like getting 1,000 little paper cuts. One by itself stings for a second, but then you move on. Thousands are harder to ignore. They bleed everywhere, and everything that touches you hurts. On top of that, the people giving you the paper cut keep pouring salt on the wounds. You beg and you hope that they will stop because the very first paper cut you ever got, they helped put a Band-Aid on. But the more you beg and the more you realize that you're the problem because you stay even though they keep giving you paper cuts. The only way out is to burn the library to the ground, so that's what you do. And you find that, actually, the fire sealed all the little cuts and you feel better than you have in years. Draco says nothing for a while. She passes by Luna's spirit. The girl died before Hermione's first killing curse, though something told her that Luna wouldn't have turned on her the way everyone else had. Hermione gave the witch a sad smile. Draco's eyes were still on her, cataloging every one of her facial expressions. How many people have you killed? Hermione shook her head. How would I possibly know that? Draco stopped, so suddenly that it took her by surprise. What? Hermione frowned at him in confusion. How long did it take you to stop counting, Granger? How long did it take before you stopped replaying their faces in your mind when you went to bed? Draco demanded. I never did that. Hermione gave him a pointed stare. It was him or Ginny. I chose Ginny. I will always choose Ginny. She is my best friend. Yes, the first death was hard for me. Once upon a time, in the beginning, I went back to the Order and cried for nearly a week. I listened silently as every person expressed their disgust and disappointment in my choice to end a life. Hermione squared her shoulders, her gaze narrowing on him. But I got over it, and Ginny was by my side for every moment of that. Her face was a constant reminder that I did the right thing. When I killed the next Death Eater a few weeks later, it was hardly even a surprise, and I certainly didn't lose sleep over them. I couldn't even tell you what they looked like or why I did it again. I'm sure if I interacted with everyone here, then I would figure it out. But why would I bother? What would it matter? You're a killer, Draco. When you look at me, isn't it like looking in the mirror? Draco stared at her with distrusting eyes, silence stretched between them. Just when she thought that the conversation was over and she turned to continue the search, did he respond? Yes, and I think that's what's most unnerving. Hermione hummed in response. She wasn't interested in yet another conversation about her morality. It was Goyle. What was? Hermione passed by Molly Weasley, her spirit earning a double take from Draco. The second person you killed, Draco said quietly. Oh, was all Hermione had to say. George Weasley caught her eye. Finally, she sighed with relief, brushing past one half of the Weasley twins. Fred would be floating somewhere behind her. She began to search the crowd in front of her for a face of either boy he had requested to see. This must have taken an impossible amount of work to create, Draco commented, looking around them. Hermione said distractedly. I think it was about 5 months, maybe 4, sometime after we went on the run, but it was done before the manor. Oh, there's Harry. Come on, quickly, before I lose him again. Harry stopped and turned to face her as she ran up to him. Even his spirit self stared at her in disapproval. Hermione scoffed at the boy she had once been willing to die for. How young and naive had she been? Draco appeared beside her. How do I, he trawled off, just touch his forehead, Hermione explained. Hermione rubbed her eyes. She had been reading for so long that the words were blurring together. She was trying to find anything that could give them a new direction to go in. They had been at this for months and reached a dead end. Ron lay in the tent. She had tried to heal him the best she could, but the splinch had been bad, and in all her preparation, she had only managed minimal training with healing spells. Which meant that they were stuck here until he was well enough to risk apparating again. Her stomach rumbled. She was so tired. Harry stood quickly, sighing in frustration at her lack of progress. How long until he can travel again? Hermione inhaled sharply. His words sounded full of frustration. She frowned up at him. I'm doing everything I can, Hermione reasoned softly. You are not doing enough. Hermione flinched from the sharp barb. How much could she do? She was doing everything there was to do. Draco frowned and waved his hand. The memory shimmered and changed. Ginny's awake. Harry's voice was cold and hard in the doorway. Hermione looked up at him, relieved. Her head hurt from all the crying she had done. Her entire body ached. Her chest was the worst. All she wanted to do was curl up in bed and sleep. Thank Merlin. Hermione stood and took a step towards the doorway. Where do you think you're going? Her bolted at Harry's question. Hermione trolled off. Ron and I talked, Hermione. We don't want you around Ginny right now. Harry, Hermione exclaimed. You killed someone, Hermione. Hermione flinched. And that somehow makes me a pariah now, does it? I'm still me. I was protecting her for Merlin's sake. He stared back at her with the same face she had seen on Kingsley's earlier, on the faces of Padma and Parvati, Ron and Molly, and every single person she had interacted with since. The Hermione I know would never have done something so heinous. She would have found another way. She wouldn't have given up like that. I have no idea who you are. Stay away from her. Harry turned his back and walked away from her while Hermione's knees gave out underneath her. Another wave of his hand, another memory. You poisonous wretch! Harry stormed into the attic without knocking. Hermione was in the middle of retrieving the cigarettes she kept in her drawers. Blood matted her hair. It wasn't hers, some Death Eater on the receiving end of a slicing hex in their earlier run-in. Normally she would have headed to the shower, but currently Ginny was sitting on the roof and needed her more. Hello to you too, Harry, Hermione drawled. It's bad enough that you've damned yourself, but now you're dragging Ginny down with you? Hermione's eyes hardened. Don't you dare, Harry James Potter. You have no idea what Ginny is going through right now. I will not allow you to treat her the way you all treated me. Ginny saved my life, and she doesn't deserve your holier-than-thou bullshit right now, she hissed quietly. Oh, but you do, right, Hermione? You're the only one that can help her now. You got what you wanted, didn't you? Someone to sink in the misery with you. I'm not the only one that can help her, but I am the only one that knows what she's going through. I know you don't get it. How can you? You haven't been outside in 2 years. You have no idea what it's true like, but I did what I needed to in order to survive and save the lives of the people in this damn house. I will be the resident villain if I have to, but you listen here, Harry Potter. If I have Ginny in here later crying because you can't see that she's still a good person, then I promise there will be hell to pay. Harry scoffed at her. We should have left you in the manor that night. Seeing the person you've become is much worse fate than if you had just died that night. Hermione felt as though he had struck her. She slammed the door shut and glared at him. You're right, you should have. Now get the fuck out of my room. Draco scowled beside her. Are they all like this? In varying degrees of intensity, but yes, for the most part, he just ignored my presence after that. But a few more disagreements about Ginny, he would remind me I'm a piece of shit. I caught him fucking Elise, blah, blah, blah. Who the fuck is Elise? Hermione shrugged. Some order chick. There's Ron, Hermione pointed at the wizard. Draco strolled over and jabbed his finger into his forehead. No, Ron snapped. You didn't even hear me out, Hermione exclaimed across the small oval table in the meeting room upstairs. All around the table, people avoided her eyes. You're right. I'm sorry. Continue, Ron offered, a tight, forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I think I can create a homing device. It would be like a handheld wireless, but it would scan the area and reflect it back on a miniature hologram. If Death Eaters were nearby, they would show up as little red dots. It'd be highly effective for neutralizing them quickly without us suffering so many casualties. Neutralize them? Merlin, do you even hear yourself? Ron scoffed in disgust. Hermione sighed audibly. I didn't mean it like that, Ron, Hermione explained. But you would, wouldn't you? You would kill them if you came across them. Hermione leaned back, her mouth snapping shut. Her eyes narrowed on him, and he sneered at her, a tiny nod of his head as if she had just confirmed his claims. Kingsley, this could save. I'm afraid I'm with Ron on this one. In the wrong hands, that could. Oh, cut the bullshit and just say it. You think I'm the wrong hands. Say it. She glared at the older wizard at the head of the table, and he stared back at her, unimpressed by her outburst. Yes, that is correct, he stated finally. Then give it to someone else, Hermione screamed in frustration. The answer is no, Miss Granger, and that is final. Hermione stood so fast that her chair fell backwards with a loud clatter. She was so angry and so frustrated. This could save so many lives, the precious lives that were dwindling under the growing forces of the Death Eaters. She was halfway out the door before the tears of frustration that rarely made their appearance sprung free. Blimmin' barmy that one, Ron laughed. Hermione's blood ran cold, and she spun back and stormed into the room, barely giving those present time to get over their surprise before her fist collided with his face twice. "Stupefy," someone shouted. "When was this?" Draco asked. 3, 4 years ago," Hermione shrugged. "That could have tipped the war in your favor back then," Draco stated. "Oh, I know," Hermione agreed. Draco looked around. The faces surrounded them. "Kingsley?" Hermione pushed through the crowd, Draco trailing along behind her. Eventually, they found the man standing far off in the corner. Draco didn't even hesitate anymore. He walked straight up to him and jabbed his forehead at the spirit, as if the spirit would feel it. Hermione held an ice pack to her face against a swollen bump in her cheekbone. Elizabeth Bratman sat in the chair, a neck brace around her throat. For what, she didn't know. Padma had healed her. "I'll be keeping your wand, Miss Granger." "Like hell you will," Hermione exclaimed. Kingsley stared into her eyes. Once upon a time, the wizard had liked her, respected her even. The more of herself she gave up for this fucking order, the less he liked her. "You should have thought about that before you acted the way you did." Hermione's mouth fell open. "She attacked me," Hermione yelled, her outrage rising. "And yet, when I found you two, your hands were around her throat," Kingsley justified dismissively. "I came to you last week and told you about the lunchtime incident. I told you about the things they were saying, and I pleaded with you to intervene before things got to this level. And I told you then that if you would stop giving people a reason to be afraid of you, then your life would significantly improve here. If you prefer, my offer to transfer you to the camp in Austria still stands." "She hit me in the fucking face with a crowbar," Hermione hissed. "Are you telling me I'm not allowed to defend myself?" "In the manner you did, no. A simple sticking charm and walking away would have been more than appropriate. In addition to your wand, you will be confined to your room without visitors of any kind until you can apologize to Miss Bratman." "Go to hell, Kingsley," Hermione spat and stood up to leave the room, but he was already stupefying her. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Draco snapped. "Excuse me? Why the hell would you fight by their side for so long?" Draco scowled. Hermione smiled smugly. "So you see my point then?" Draco stared at her. "I suppose I do." It didn't stop him from wandering her mind, though, playing memories of people Hermione doubted he recognized or even knew. She stood back and watched patiently alongside him. Themis approaching her, attempting to proposition her into a quickie, and when he turned her down, telling everyone the reverse to be true. Candace, Tarly, and her sparring in the basement. Nothing bad happened between the two. It was just general dislike the girl had for her. She and Ginny leading a mission into Kent the day Ron snapped her wand. The defiance of Dean Thomas that had led to his death. Hermione listening to Romalda and her little posse gossiped about her. Another rejected experimental proposal. Another person telling her that they were disgusted with her and that they had looked up to her in school, but now. George telling her to stay strong, that he was sorry he had to leave her and Ginny alone to deal with this, but that he needed to go help the safe house in Scotland. He kissed her goodbye. They hadn't dated at all, but they had, on occasion, used each other to deal with the stress of the war. Elizabeth swinging a crowbar into the side of her neck out of nowhere as Hermione rounded a corner. Ginny coming into the kitchen while Hermione was on scrubbing duties, immediately stepping in to help her before Yvonne Kennedy walked in and sent her packing because the bitch is here for punishment, Weasley, not a little gossip session. Draco's ghostly apparition walked past. Draco's eyes darkened as his finger reached out and touched his head almost nervously. Draco strolled in, interrupting any train of thought. He changed into a pair of tan trousers and a short-sleeved black button-up that he hadn't bothered to bar the bottom to, where he had the shirt loosely tucked into his pants. Hermione allowed her eyes to roam over his defined chest, taking in his scars before Ginny squeezed her arm and tore her eyes away. Objectively speaking, Hermione could admit he was nice to look at. Very nice to look at indeed. How strong was he? Strong enough to hold her up and buck her? Hermione threw her defenses up quickly, blocking the memory to him. Draco locked his jaw as he stared down at her. Hermione stared back, refusing to back down. "What's the matter, Granger?" he smirked. "I thought you said I could look at whatever I need to." Hermione glared up at him. "You have your own fantasies to jerk off to, Malfoy. You're not stealing mine," she tried to say with as much disinterest as possible. Strolling away from the blonde spirit, beside, "I think you will find this memory much more interesting," she spoke quietly as she came to a stop in front of a tall man, handsome with pale skin, dark hair, and even darker brown eyes. "Who is he?" Hermione smiled at the man. "Tom Riddle, before he became Voldemort."